Welcome, boys and girls. Costin here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Lords of the End Times DLC. Creative Assembly has revealed a bunch of information. They've put up the store pages. They've given content creators access to a certain build that apparently only goes for 10 turns. I personally don't have access to it. That's a discussion about the content creator program. But from what I've seen, they've been able to play certain campaigns, but out of the new ones, they've only really been able to touch Todbringer. I'm surprised, at least I haven't seen anything related to Archeon or vampire counts for that particular matter, because those would be very interesting things to talk about. But we do have a bunch of information and maybe things that haven't been said but have been revealed through all the information we do have and what content creators have been able to show, especially related to a rework. So we do have the trailer where Thanquol captured Gotrek and Felix. If he captured them, which in itself is a miracle as far as Thanquol is concerned, why didn't he just kill them? Did at any point in the Gotrek and Felix stories, did they ever get captured by Thanquol? And if so, how are they still alive? I'm just making that. I guess Thanquol Kunfriz is making his big evil villain speech, which always doesn't work. But anyway, so information on Nagash and the undead factions. Like, Nagash is looking pretty good right there with books of Nagash and various units, Morghast, and all that. So his vision is to amass undead legions, erect vast necropolises in his own glory, and transform the world into a vast land of undead. Yeah, that is Nagash. So he must gather the 9 Mortarchs, his lieutenants in trials to come, and reclaim the lost books of Nagash. Now, here's where I got a bit iffy. The way the books of Nagash work, the way you acquire them, either through rogue armies or from certain settlements, you have to capture some of them very far away, is a pretty shitty system. And hopefully that's something they improve, not just for Nagash, but for everyone involved, like how you acquire a book, how you use a book, the way the benefits work of the book is like it's randomized right now. It affects every campaign. You talk about Volkmar, you talk about Tomb Kings, you talk about Manfred. It is also the question of how it's going to affect the existing campaigns. In terms of Nagash, he basically starts next to Cetra. So I imagine if you're playing Nagash or if you're playing Cetra, the first thing you're going to want to do in your campaign as either of them is take the other guy out. Really, because why wouldn't you? Like, it is appropriate in a lot of ways that Cetra and Nagash have their first confrontation. I also think it's appropriate that they start with that specific point, because Nagash did confront Cetra. It's just he kind of was really powerful by the time they actually met, so Cetra didn't stand the chance. It depends on what he's going to start with. So, Legendary Lord, obviously Nagash. Legendary Heroes, 2 of them. Interesting. So, 2 Legendary Heroes, Dieter Helsinich and Wallach Harkon. I have totally not butchered those names, but regardless, yes, those are important Vampire Counts characters, undead characters, but I kind of was hoping that the Nameless would have a role in all of this, because he did have a far bigger role than Dieter, for instance, in End Times for Nagash. Then he betrayed Nagash, joined Nurgle, so that is an interesting way. Lord-wise, you do get High Lich Priest, but this brings up the question with Tomb Kings especially. Not so much with Nagash himself, though I'm also curious how that's going to play out. But if you look at the Tomb Kings race, and you look at the dynasties, you get a bunch of Tomb Kings or Tomb Princes, Tomb Kings, that are really good because they have special benefits as a Lord effects, and they can unlock more skills than others. Like, you usually have a choice with the generic one of like, okay, you can only get this skill, but with one of those special ones, you can get all of those choices at the same time. That's a pretty big benefit. So, having a caster Lord is all well and good, but same time, if you can pick up a Tomb Print, Tomb King that gives you all those benefits, it's gonna be a question of competing. Tomb Herald, I imagine this might end up being kind of a unit that, or a kind of hero that serves a similar role as, say, a priest of Kislev, or a patriarch of Kislev, where it's more about buffing your units in combat than anything else, and would make sense for a herald. Then various units, how they get represented, not quite sure exactly, except for the ones we've seen, which is of Midland. But you have Drakenhof Templars, Spear Hosts, Morghast Harbingers, Morghast Archai, Camera Titans, and Coven Thrones. Now, out of these units, I am not sure how Spear Hosts, how Spear Hosts and Morghast units will go, but the way I see it, Drakenhof Templars and Coven Thrones would probably go to the Vampire Counts as well. And then the Cameric Titan would go for the Tomb Kings. Otherwise, only Nagash can have them. And he also has a Regiment Renown. You know, he has Ushapti. Okay. Another Ushapti Regiment Renown. That's definitely not going to be really strong. Like, Ushapti are extremely strong. But I think it is revealing that you do have a lot of, like, Tomb King stuff here. So is he going to play more similar to Tomb Kings in terms of a unit roster, which artillery for a regular undead faction plus Nagash being Nagash would be freaking awesome. Next up, we move to lovely Thanquol. So yeah, Thanquol and his horrors of horrors. Demons, mostly, really. So he has master plans as a campaign feature. Raising secret armies to strike from shadows, conducting dark rituals, so's made him in the world. Things don't always go according to plan, though. So things may blow up in your face. But you could potentially deal with them. That doesn't sound like Thanquol. Thanquol is the kind of guy who's like, oh, okay, this plan has a 99% chance of failure. Let's go with it anyway. Because that 1% is still really good, right? That's the kind of person Thanquol is. Or he doesn't even realize a plan has a 99% chance of failure. And it's interesting what people have discovered with Thanquol. He starts between Ungrim, Forgrim, Sylvania, and Skarsnik. So he starts in Blackwater. Okay, you're gonna fight the dwarves initially, as the Skaven. Not really a horrible thing. And very importantly, I would say you don't start with the capital, the provincial capital, you start in Minor Settlement. And that's actually a pretty big deal for Skaven, because when you look at Skaven, starting without a provincial capital is a boon, because it gives you a couple turns to acquire some food and then get that capital to tier 3 or tier 4. And that is also a big point, because I haven't seen anything to indicate that they have reworked the Skaven. Now, to be quite honest, I think Skaven in a lot of ways work pretty well. Though I think their economy should work different to work in smaller provinces. And the whole food mechanic and Undercity, like, there's things that they can improve. But do they work really well? Yes. Could they be improved? Yes. I would say I would be happy if they improved the research tree at the very least. So he can cast spells from Plague and Ruin. He also has the dreaded 13th spell. What I don't see, however, here is End Times Thanquol. So when I say End Times Thanquol, and then this is more like, I guess, Skaven Slayer Thanquol or regular Thanquol with his master plans and all that. But when you look at End Times Thanquol, he was chosen by the Great Horned Rat to unite all the Skaven and lead them. And none of that is reflected in the text over here. Maybe it will be reflected in the campaign. I don't know. Maybe one of those master plans is take over all of the Skaven. It would also be interesting to talk about Skaven Confederation mechanics. That would be a pretty big thing. But anyway, so we have Thanquol, the Great Seer, Legendary Lord, Legendary Mount, Bone Ripper. You know, it's kind of a shame with some of these Legendary Lords, because they have these mounts that just eclipse them when you actually play the game, and you have very little reason not to put them on the mount if it's a dragon or Bone Ripper. Then we get Vermin King. Okay, so Legendary Demon Skaven. Remember, Skaven are a chaos faction. Then we have Vermin Lords as a lord choice. Corruptor, Warpseer, Warbringer, Deceiver. Stormfiends, melee, Grindfist, Doomflayer gauntlets, and shock gauntlets. Stormfiends with missile weapons. Oh yes, going fully on the Stormfiend options menu. This, by the way, brings up the thing about like Warband upgrade, how it would be an awesome system to have for more races, because like you'll look at these variants of units and that would be freaking awesome to just be able to switch between them, depending on what you're doing, for a cost, of course. Then we have Pushbacks, Warp Doom Magma Cannon, because yes, Skaven definitely needed more artillery, but okay. Cauldron of 1,000 Poxes. I mean, I guess when you look at Stormfiends, depends on tier, requirements, cost, etc. But one of the big problems of Skaven right now in the game is their melee situation really is not great. Like, Storm Vermin don't do enough. Clan Rats are fucking terrible. So having melee Stormfiends especially will change that. As for Rattling Gunners, I guess it depends on how they play out in a battle and how useful they can be. But Plague Regiment Renown, it's like, okay, Death Vermin, Storm and Shield, Storm Vermin, Rattling Gunner. How many Rattling Gunners regiments are renowned? Okay, it's a Stormfiend Rattling Gunner, but we already have one. Then we have Eka Claw Special one, and now we're getting Thanquol with Rattling Gunners on Stormfiends. Next up, we have Boris Todbringer, Count of Midland, and this is the one lord where we've gotten the most information because people have been able to cover it. So you defeat enemies of the Empire, you get favor of his factions. So this allows you to develop the great Temple of Ulrich, enhance its 6 sanctuaries, and perform great winter rites to energize his armies, and various benefits. What this doesn't say, however, is that you can deal, like your endgame scenario as Boris, is to deal with Beastman attacks in Midland. And with those attacks, you're kind of going towards a final confrontation towards Kazrak. So maybe that's what Nagash has with Cetra. I imagine so. Or others. You know, get all that power, become a god. That probably could be Nagash's endgame with Thanquol. I don't know, destroy the world, destroy Lustria, sit on a beach and laugh at everyone else. I don't know what Thanquol's endgame would be. Uniting all the Skaven in under his rule definitely could be one of the possibilities right there. He does have a weapon. He's pretty good in combat. He also has a bunch of benefits for melee units, and one of the things I've said in the past is that what the Empire needs is like better melee infantry. Like, when you look at Empire melee infantry at the moment, you either have a lot of units, flagellants, spearmen, swordsmen, halberdiers even, that are just practically useless, because what you really want for the most part for an Empire line, given the fact that you don't have damage dealing infantry as the Empire, and even great swords don't compare to other units, you want to focus on the range gunpowder, so you need line holders to protect your flanks. So basically spearmen with shields, to some lesser extent halberdiers, but really spearmen shields are just a better unit. But now, but now things are very, very different. What I've seen is he has the ability of doing global recruitment of Ulrich units. He can also buff them up. He can get a bunch of melee buffs. So already, when you're talking about Todbringer, he would genuinely make melee units overall better. So better greatswords, for instance, in a campaign. Better halberdiers, who knows, they might actually be worth recruiting in a Todbringer campaign. Though the problem with halberdier is low level of armor. But still, so you get Boris Todbringer, Legendary Lord, R. Ulrich Emil Valgir as the Legendary Hero. Okay. You know, one of the things I would say about these Legendary Heroes is that I understand why they're Legendary Heroes, but some of them I would really like them to be like a second Lord option, because it kind of doesn't make sense for the Seneschal of the White Wolf to be a Lord choice and Velgir to be a Legendary Hero. That's kind of my perspective on this. Like, I get why some of them are legendary heroes, but I would really like the option for them to lead an army, and I think that should be something that Creative Assembly in general looks at legendary heroes, because, yeah, a lot of them would really lead an army. Like, sure, not all of them. Gotrek and Felix lead an army would not really fit, for instance, but, you know, Garagrim fucking definitely would lead an army. Garadriel definitely would lead an army, for instance. I mean, one of the legendary heroes, the one of Siege, whatever his name was, I forget that right now. So many names. But the one of Siege, the warrior one, he actually was the one that destroyed Kislev, so that means he led an army. So it's one of those situations, like, obviously it makes sense, you know, put the legendary hero with your main lord, but it would also be great to have them being able to become a lord option. And I think the engine can definitely support that. But anyway, we get Priest of Ulrich. Not surprising as a generic hero option, because, yeah, we got Priest of Sigmar, Priest of Ulrich. A big surprise of what they'll actually do in a campaign. Then we have Wolfkin, Hunting Hounds, Warriors of Ulrich, Toyota Gengar, Knights of the Panther, Knights of the White Wolf, and Celestial Hurricane. Okay, so Cavalry, we'll see how they square off against Reiksguard, the Knights of the Blazing Sun. Some people have this view that, oh, these are going to be better cavalry, to which I reply, Knights of the Blazing Sun are really good because they have a lot of charge value. Reiksguard are good because they're all pretty balanced in terms of stats, so it's not as simple. Personally, I do prefer Knights of the Blazing Sun, but to argue that, like, I think there's always going to be people who are going to complain about power creep, and I don't really see that from what I've seen of, like, Knights Panther. Like, Knights of the White Wolf probably going to be more melee damage heavy, but that brings the question, like, okay, what about Knights of the Black Rose? To which my reply would be, Knights of the Black Rose, their purpose is to be an anchor in your lines for different purposes. Then naturally, some of them end up being better for playing a campaign. Yeah, sure. As for the various units here, you know, Hunting Hounds, whatever. But Wolfkin and Warriors of Ulrich. So when you look at this, you're looking at two early game infantry options that have the same level of durability, like furry armor, as a lot of other early game Imperial infantry. And some people are, oh, this is just going to be flat out better. To which my reply would be, you have a dual wield infantry, okay, that can do more damage, right? So, because they also have certain abilities that can help their damage dealing capability. But here's what you don't have. You don't have the durability of spearmen with shields. So yeah, sure, they're going to be better than swordsmen. Who gives a shit, basically. It's like, that's one of the worst units in the game. They're better than spearmen. Whether or not they're better against halberdiers depends. Like, you do have also a great weapon version. So against halberdiers, like, halberdiers would be better against large, the dual-wield infantry. Like, one of the things dual-wield infantry doesn't do very well in, like, especially when you're looking at the early game versions, they don't tend to scale well in an end game unless they have a high level of durability. So it's like, you look at Corsairs, that's the reason they... And even then, Corsairs do struggle in terms of damage dealing capability. Nasty Skulkers are the exception to this rule, and even they have their own problems. So it's an early game infantry unit to deal with other infantry. Then you have a great weapon version, and that's where things get interesting. Because we've all seen what happens when you put armor-piercing, furry armor, and decent enough leadership, and they do have decent enough leadership, on an early game infantry unit. You get Kislevite warriors. Now these guys, but the great weapon version of Warriors of Ulrich, basically, or like, you know, the Ulrich units, the great weapon version might be really good from that perspective, but still remember, when you're building an army, you're also building an army for longevity. And when we talk about longevity, it's also the question is like, okay, I'm recruiting on units. How many turns am I going to use this unit? And also, how well will this integrate with other units that I'm going to get in an army? I am not sold on the idea that the Empire is certainly going to become a melee-focused race. You can probably make it work with Boris because of the various benefits he gets faction-wide and lord-wise as for melee units. But even then, when you look at artillery situation, will this remove the benefit of having spearmen or shields? And crucially, will it remove the benefit of having Eldred's Guard? One of the more important benefits here, or one of the bigger questions, and I haven't seen this answered really by YouTubers, is with sanctuaries for the Great Temple, how much is it going to take me to acquire Eldred's Guards? Because the reason Eldred's Guards are so important is they're a spearman with shield infantry that has AA armor. So they're far more durable than regular spearman shields. They're certainly far more durable than the stats that we've seen. They compare to greatswords and Teutogen Guard. As for Teutogen Guard versus greatswords, again, remains to be seen on that subject. Like, that might be the only situation where I guess one unit would be better than others, like Teutogens versus greatswords, but even then might be a discussion about, like, durability versus pure damage dealing capability, aggressiveness. Then we have Glottkin. Okay, so what I would like to also mention, from what I've seen, everything that I've seen, all the footage I've seen, we have not gotten a rework for the Empire. That's the only thing we can confirm right now, based on the footage we have seen. Like, maybe some minor change, but, like, I'm pretty sure the research tree is almost exactly the same, if not exactly the same. The building tree and all that, but again, lack of information. Like, I've seen some videos, but they mostly, they spend a lot of time. Like, you might catch glimpses of, like, the building tree and research tree on that subject, but not necessarily as much as I really want to be able to answer that. But it really seems to me that the Empire hasn't been reworked. Okay, the Empire does work, but it does have some things it could use changes on, especially with regards to the research tree. That would be something really beneficial. But that brings up the question of Skaven, Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts. Vampire Counts are the only race that Creative Assembly has indicated they will get a full rework. And we haven't seen any footage of that. I'm curious about this. The reason I mention this especially now is because Glottkin, they're Warriors of Chaos of Nurgle. Archon apparently has gotten an entire rework. Whether or not he ends up beating Be'lakor is a different discussion. Now, Boris does start in Midland. He does start with settlements. The other two are taken by a minor faction of Skaven. So, what we have with Glottkin, apparently they start in the Varg territory. Which, if I'm being honest, on the subject, that might make them really strong. Just purely on the following basis. One, Norska has no fucking chance against Warriors of Chaos in a campaign. Like, with respect. Yes, I know, Trog and his trolls become really strong, but when you play against Norska, you know what they'll usually do? They'll recruit a bunch of fucking marauders. Later on, they become a problem, but if you're starting right there in Norska, you can just destroy both Ulfric and Trog or vassalize them and just gain all the Dark Fortresses there, and there's quite a few of them as well. So, and I would also remind people that Nurgle has a Gift of Chaos, and you probably will start with Gifts of Chaos of Nurgle unlocked, because Festus does. You do have a Gift of Chaos that gives you extra growth, and then when you pair that with the fact that, you have a Dark Fortress in the Varg territory, you're probably going to take that in turn 1, I don't know, or very quickly. It means that you get to higher tiers, you get heroes, you get economy, you get campaign momentum, so you can start moving fast. Yeah, imagine having a Nurgle campaign where it wasn't like 20 turns of fucking misery and it actually got shit done very quickly when it was relevant. That's, by the way, the thing I have with all Nurgle campaigns in the game. I mean, Festus does work better, but he's also kind of screwed a bit because of his starting position, and though he gets a couple of vassals early on, he dominates, but it's just other Warriors of Chaos are better. Which, again, this is the thing about Warriors of Chaos, Legendary Lords. Like, you have Be'lakor, who's the best. Glottkin has the benefit of fortresses and terrain that makes them easier to access. Because, like, Archon takes multiple turns to get his fortress and it takes him a long time. Be'lakor has to cross the sea. It's a bit awkward, but that's one of the benefits that works in him. Glottkin might end up being better. So you have Legendary Lord Glottkin, 4 Legendary Heroes. Jesus. Yolosapien, Morbid Twiceborn, Blob Rot Spawn, Orgot's Demon Spew. Okay, we'll find out how these play out in terms of their combat capability on that, like what kind of benefits. But adding 4 Legendary Heroes, I imagine he's going to start with 1. Like, Boris starts with 1. And maybe all of them do start with 1 Legendary Hero. We'll find out. He does have Putrid Blight Kings, Axe, Shield, Grey Weapons, and Dual White Axes. Giant Spined Chaos Beast, Flarekin, Chaos Siege Giant, and Basilisk. I'd say the most relevant unit over here is probably the Chaos Siege Giant. You got Toad Dragons already. Mortal units are already freaking good, so I'm not necessarily sold on a lot of this stuff, but we do have Sons of Lost Plague, Bane of Wintengast, Repugnance of the Brass Keep. Funny you mentioned the Brass Keep. Maybe the Glottkin should have been switched with Festus in the Brass Keep, but I don't know. Creative Assembly has the tendency of not wanting to change positions for Legendary Lords. It's like, oh, we put Festus here. It's like, could you remove him? Put Glottkin there? He's far more suitable in that location. Now, his unique campaign mechanics, he gains Gifts of Nurgle, of course. They generate significant levels of Nurgle corruptions, conquering settlements. And essentially, they end up being able to get access to a higher proportion of demonic Nurgle units than any other Warriors of Chaos faction. And you also generate plagues. Okay! Let me say this much. Nurgle plagues suck. Nurgle units, some are good, many are useless compared to mortal units. So my question on this subject would be, how good is this going to be versus just massing Warriors of Chaos? And also beating the pinnacle of a demonic faction, really, in terms of or a monogod faction, if you will, in terms of capability, which is like Arbol. Yes, Arbol has the best monogod faction in the entire game right now, and yes, I know he's Corn 9 Warriors of Chaos. I don't really care. That is the big question. And also, we do have to ask about Archon. And then we have Neferata. Some people have said that we basically got Neferata's character pack for free, and considering what Bashiva get, I gotta agree with that sentiment. Maybe we would have gotten Coven Throne for her, but we do. Let me say it like this. So everyone else has their cool, quirky, unique campaign mechanics. Now, I'm skeptical of unique campaign mechanics because I've seen with Tides of Torment how badly CA did that. And you end up in a situation where the free campaign, and also Omens of Destruction, I gotta say. Like, Omens of Destruction, best campaign, Arbol. Tides of Torment's best campaign, Mask, by far. Some people want to talk about the Kala. Sure. Power-wise, we have that discussion. Campaign mechanics-wise, something that works well within the context of the game is going to beat something that's trying to do something flashy. That's one of the reasons Aislin's campaign is... Sales campaign is also the same bullshit. Because making a gimmick system of campaign mechanic is a big question. And this brings me up to Neferata. I swear, if we end up at another situation where the free campaign is better than the paid one, it's going to be ridiculous. And I think that would show, more than anything, that the developers in Creative Assembly are too focused on the idea of, like, oh, we just want to make these unique campaign systems. Okay, so you make these unique campaign systems, but they don't matter, and no one cares about them. And don't tell me you care about fucking the Kala's curses and all that. Because even as the Kala, for instance, you only care about slaves to get your main settlements and torments and all that. You get armies, you decimate the campaign map, you get vassals. So all those like nifty upgrades you can get, that's like kind of irrelevant. The only relevant thing is research to unlock all the global recruitment units you can acquire as the Kala. But that's where I stand. It's like, oh, but long campaigns. Like, look, boys and girls. The game has been out for 4 years. If at this point you consider the mid-game anything less than, say, 20, 30 turns, I'm not sure what to tell you. And even as an average player, even if you're a new player, when you play a lot of games, even as a new player, you're looking for the shortest path to victory. Now, this is not, there's a difference between this and cheese, definitely. But if the game is rewarding early game aggression, pushing hard, doing stuff hard, then the systems of the game should work in it. A good game is one that understands this and still provides a interesting late game where you actually are forced to use all the tools. But that's the problem Warhammer 3 has right now, because it doesn't have an end game. So I'm really curious about the end game crises that they have in store, what kind of end game campaigns we would have for the different characters, because let's be real here, like the actual campaigns, be it dragon ships or Dekala chasing down for some Caphaians, or Sales Hold Ritual, left a lot to be desired. So that is really the questions. Like, from what I did see with Boris, it does seem to be something more engaged throughout the campaign, but I'm really interested in seeing if it's just a reason for you to spend to keep an army stacked in Middenheim all times to deal with some fucking beastmen, aka Wood Elves, Empire version. That's not really going to be an interesting system, though apparently you can disable it from at least what I saw. But anyway, that is all we got. With Neferata, we got Handmaidens, we get the hero or legendary hero, Handmaidens, 2 versions, Lamian vampires, which is what you'd expect, right? Like, Neferata doesn't necessarily have a lot of units to her name, and when you're adding Nagash as a legendary lord in the DLC, it would be kind of weird if Nagash doesn't get everything. Again, Coven Throne makes sense. Dragunov Templars, probably going to be relevant for a Vampire Counts campaign, but I'm really interested in the siege situation for Vampire Counts, campaign dynamics, vassalization, blood kisses, research. Those are the kind of questions I would like CA to answer. With Neferata, she does start in the Silver Pinnacle. Ever since they changed the Darklands with the release of the Chaos Dwarves, it just has made sense that they were eventually going to add Neferata there. Lo and behold, they're adding Neferata right there. That is all I had to say. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more, because it will be a lot more coming as we get access to builds and I can show off various things.